Hello students, I'm Professor Benavides and let's go over chapter 1, getting started. Now I'm going to just pick out topics out of this chapter. This chapter talks about a lot of things about installing Python and installing editors. I'm going to zero in on running some Python scripts at the terminal window and then compare that with running Python programs with a text editor. Okay, so let's get to the terminal window. He calls it a terminal window. That's more of a UNIX kind of term. In the world of Windows, we refer to that as a command prompt. Now, to get there, he says, click inside the search box on the taskbar and type in command. And that actually starts command prompt. I've always just typed in CMD, which gets you to the same place. Now that brings open the command prompt. Now I've got mine customized. I usually change the color and the size of the font. Let me show you how I did that. If you right mouse click on the title bar, go to properties. No, this is not in your book. There's many things to change, but I usually make the font a little bit bigger. Right now, I mean, it's super big, 16. Let me take it to 18. But as far as the colors are concerned, I usually just change two things. The screen, when you click on screen text, you can see that it's highlighting amber, because I used to have an amber screen back in the good old days, right? Screen background, see how it's highlighting black. It's kind of difficult to see that, but it is. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to green for the text color. I'm going to click OK. Nothing happens. You actually have to close and come in again. There we go. So how's that for a little detour as soon as we get started? So what we want to do is we want to get to the terminal window. And that's different from the command prompt. Now in the command prompt, I can do things like DOS commands. You know, there's two commands that he covers here. He covers the CD command and the dir command in this chapter with reference to Windows. He does cover other commands with reference to Linux and to the macOS. But since I'm on a PC right now, I'm going to just zero in on dealing with, you know, a PC at the command prompt. So how do we get to the interpreter? Okay, so to be specific, the Python interpreter. So what we do here is we type in the word Python. When we see this greater than sign, we're in the Python interpreter, okay? That's different from the command prompt. To get out of here, you can type in exit, and you got to put in the silly little open and close, you know, parentheses. Okay, I'm back at the command prompt. So all I'm doing right now is just going back and forth so you can get used to the interface. If I want to get a directory listing, I type in dir. See, I have a many different directories on my computer. You know, if I want to move to the desktop, you type in CD and then the name of the folder, which, and actually desktop is a folder, believe it or not. And that takes me to the desktop. If I do a dir, those are all the folders that I have on my desktop. To go back, you type in cd ... I don't think he mentioned that. And that takes me back to my account. So you type in dir, those are the folders on my account, documents and things of that nature. Okay, so let's get to the Python interpreter, and we'll elaborate as we go along and compare this with a text editor. So to get to the Python interpreter, remember it's Python, and this is what you would type if you were in Windows. It would be different if you were on a Mac or Linux. All right, so now here I can go ahead and type in different Python commands. Now, we could do math, we can do a bunch of things on here. He only does one simple little thing. He types in, the author of your book types in hello Python interpreter. That was all that was done in this introductory chapter. So let me go ahead and show you how that's done. And of course, many of you are wondering, why would you do this? Let me do it first, and we'll talk about why you would want to do this. So we're going to say print, and then we're going to go ahead and print is a function, and we pass it an argument. We pass the argument inside of the parenthesis. And we're going to pass it a string literal, and this string literal can either be in single quotes or double quotes. All right, so we'll just go ahead and use the double quotes for today. Hello, Python interpreter. Should that be with a capital I? He didn't use the capital I, so I'll just go ahead and exclamation and then close it. Now, when I press enter, you're actually issuing the command. So what you'll find here, that this may seem kind of primitive, but actually advanced users like this, they can go ahead and do a lot of things real fast this way. If you're learning the language, or if you're trying out new things, you can go ahead and go through a multitude of commands really fast this way. So the beginning of the book covers the Python interpreter, but you're not going to be using that to turn in any work to me. You're going to be saving your work in a file, and I'll show you. We'll contrast that in just a minute. Okay, so he didn't cover this, but you can go. I think he covers it in other chapters. Like you can do math too, like print. In this case, we'll say 3 times 3, and there's the answer, 9. Now, he doesn't cover this, but this is kind of cool. If you press the up arrow one time and then another time, you can go back to the previous commands. And the down arrow, you can, so in other words, up and down arrow allows you to circulate through the previous commands, and then you can just simply reissue them again. Okay, so that's the command interpreter. He just went in and got out. He went ahead and covered how this works on the Mac and on Linux. Basically, on the Mac, you type in Python 3 if it's installed. Remember, Appendix A shows you how to install Python. Appendix B shows you how to install a text editor. I will go ahead and talk about those in separate videos. Right now, I'm simply addressing the Windows use of the Python interpreter and in a terminal window. To use his terms, it's a command prompt, right? So to see what kind of version you have of Python, you could type in the word Python. And what happened here? We got an error. Why? Because I'm in the Python interpreter. So we have to, if you want to issue this command, you have to be outside of the Python interpreter. So we're going to say exit and press enter. And we have exited the Python interpreter. So to find out what kind of Python is installed, we would go ahead and say Python. And I have 3.8.5. Okay, so I'm at the in order to issue that command, Python space -- version, you have to be at the command line. He does cover that in your book, but it may not be apparent to you because he's using a Linux prompt. I can see from his book he's got a $ on here, and so he's really, when he says terminal window, he really means terminal window. But once you get to the Python interpreter, you're at the Python interpreter. So let's see now. What else does he go over? He talks about running Hello World from your simple, using a simple text editor, So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create the a hello world, and we're going to put it in a folder. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to demonstrate idle because it comes with Python, and then I'm going to demonstrate Sublime. But I'm going to just go ahead and throw CopyCon. CopyCon's kind of neat. It's a really ancient DOS command that allows you to create a text file. So let me go ahead and show you that real fast. So first of all, I want to get to the desktop, so I'm going to type in CD desktop. See how I'm at the desktop? Then I'm going to create a folder. Then I'm going to move inside that folder. And of course, if I do a dir, there isn't anything in there, right? So let me go ahead and create a simple file in here rather than going into the Python interpreter. And I'm going to say copy, con, and then the name of the file. And I'm going to call it hello world. .py. Press enter, and now I'm going to go ahead and type in my command. Print hello Python world. Lowercase, he puts it rather than capital. That's fine. I'll just go along with him. And then I'm going to press enter, and I'm going to do a Control-Z to close the file, and press enter, and that takes me back to where I am. So if I do a dir, I'll notice that I have one file. Now, how do I execute this? He shows you how to execute it. In this chapter, basically, you execute these Python files by, if you're going to be doing this at the command line, you would type in Python and then the name of the file. Of course, you have to be in the current work directory or specify the path to it. And there it is, hello world. Okay. So now I want to go ahead, and we haven't created any errors yet. I do want to show you some errors. It's called a traceback, and shows you where the problem occurs, and dealing with errors and stuff like that. That's addressed in Appendix C. So Appendix A talks about how to install Python. Appendix B talks about the editors, text editors, and then Appendix C talks about investigating errors and fixing errors, and it's kind of like a philosophy of how you deal with that. So let me go ahead and compare what I just did right now with idle, and then I want to compare that with Sublime. Now Sublime is the text editor that your author likes. He refers to it a whole lot. So let me go ahead and, well, first of all, let me go ahead and just start idle. When you install Python, it comes with idle. And I usually configure it a little bit, so I don't remember if I have or not, but let me go ahead and idle stands for Integrated Development Learning Environment. Okay. So yeah, I've customized it a little bit. So usually it's just a white screen. Sorry about that. Let me go ahead and go and show you, what I did. If you go to Options, Configure, usually you already know I don't see very well, so I usually go and change I usually just do two things. I usually go and change the font size, and then I usually go and change the colors and stuff like that. Sometimes I do mess with the font, but I usually just leave it alone. I've set this to 16. I'm going to go ahead and change that to 18 for my demo. So that made it a little bit bigger. Or I want to apply it, I can apply it, on here. Then, okay, so I'll apply it. Then we're going to go to General, and in General, let's see if there's anything on here that I need. Blinking cursor, highlights, keys. No, I think that's pretty much it. You'll notice here that you can, you can go ahead and use the F5, function key to go ahead and run your programs. So every editor may have a little different, so right now we realize that in order to run our programs, we're going to press F5. Here's where you change the highlights tab. You can go ahead, right now I'm using something called Idle Dark. I'm going to go ahead and change this to Idle Classic, which I believe is the one that it comes with by default, and apply. All right, okay. All right, so here's idle in all its glory. So I'm going to go ahead and perform the same thing. We've only been introduced to the print function so far. That's what I'm going to use. So print, and I'm just going to say hello. Just the name of your class, right? And then I'll, since I already talked about numbers, we'll just go ahead and do that. All right, so remember, if I could use the menu as well instead of using a keyboard shortcut. If you click on run, you'll notice that the F5 function key is what you would press to run. So either way, let's go ahead and see what happens. So here it says that you got to go ahead and save it. So I say okay. And where am I going to save this to? I'm going to go ahead and navigate to that folder that I just created. What did I call it? Python work. And I'm going to go ahead and call it hello. Hello, ITSE 1359. Okay. Now, idle does put the PY extension. So you don't have to. If you want to put it in there, doesn't matter. Save. So then what makes idle a little bit different here is that it's kind of like two windows, right? See how I've got my code in one window and the output on the other? So what I like to do when I'm in Windows sometimes is I like to get this and just drag it to the right, release, and then select my other one so I can see them both together. So if I want to continue to add more code to this, you know, let's see now. Too long of a sentence, right? But let me go ahead and run that again. I'm going to press the F5 function key. And there you see the output there below. So it's a, you know, idle can do everything that you need to do in our class. But it may not be the preference of beginners. The author of your book says that he likes Python, Sublime Text better. Sublime Text is sort of free. It bothers you to buy it if you use it. So let's go ahead and get out of here and let's try the same thing in Sublime. And then what you're gonna want to graduate to VS Code, which is not necessarily best for beginners, but it can do everything we need to do. Sublime Text cannot handle user input. So that's one chapter in your book. So we'll get to that when we get to that. But let's start Sublime. And it opens up previous programs. So I'm going to go ahead and start new, right? And I'm going to just do the same old thing again. Print, have you got this down? Now you can do single quotes too. If you're coming from another language, it's kind of strange, but you can put in a string literal in single quotes, you know? Okay. Now notice how I'm not getting any pretty colors here. Why? Because it doesn't know that it's a Python file. I'm going to have to go here and go File, Save As, and I'm going to go ahead and save it to that same folder, navigate to the desktop, go to Python Work, and I'm going to go ahead and put it here. I got to give it a file name, and I'm going to call it hello single quotes. Now, believe it or not, strangely enough, even though there's a little drop down here and you can, it makes it seem like you can choose PY, but it doesn't. It's been my experience that you actually have to type in the PY. So I have situations where sometimes students will say, I'm running the program in Sublime and it's not running right. And you find out that they just didn't put the PY on there. When we do this, we've got color. Okay, so that when I run this, and to run this, believe it or not, it's Control B. And as you can see, things are a little bit simpler here. If you want to increase or decrease the size of the screen, you just do Control minus or Control plus. What a lot of people do is they'll check a few things on here. Sometimes people like to go to view, put the ruler on to like 80 so that they have like a little line where they could, you know, where they can get an idea of whether or not they've typed too far, to the right, but other things that you can go ahead and do, besides view is you've got a really good little menu here. Let's check tools out, go to build system, and a lot of times you're going to want to check Python here. Make sure Python is checked, okay? Because Sublime Text can be used for many purposes, right? Sublime Text can be used for creating HTML, CSS. So what you're going to want to do here is, if you're using it for many purposes, you're going to want to go ahead and see what the build system is, right? You'll notice what the build system is on the lower right of your screen. You'll see what it is. So that's important that that you go ahead and do that. So Control B is what you do to go ahead and run this. Okay, so that's comparing the Python interpreter window with using a text editor. Now, what's the difference here? The difference is that you have persistence. You have all of the commands inside of a file. Some people call them a script, but it's just commands in. Why is it a script? A script would be, like, say, for example, a bunch of commands that are run together in an automated kind of way, right? So let's just call it a file, and we're going to put it in. You're going to be submitting things that to me in files. So the reason why I showed you the command, the terminal window, is so that you'd be familiar with it, but you're not going to be turning in. I mean, you can't turn in any work because there's no persistence, there. So you'll be using either Sublime or Idle or Visual Studio Code to go ahead and turn in your work to me, But I guess I should run. I think I've got VS Code here. Let me go ahead and run that one just to throw that in there, just so you can make a comparison. Let's see now. I just type in. I think it's just VS. Yeah. Visual Studio. You just type in VS. That ought to be able to launch VS Code. It's got a lot of more stuff on the on the screen. Sometimes all of this extra print and stuff can sometimes be distracting to the beginner. So I'm going to go File, New, and I'll just type in the same old thing. All right, notice how I don't have any color, so I have to go ahead and go File, Save As, and I'm going to go ahead and put it on the desktop and look for my little folder. And Visual Studio Code is another one of those text editors that does many things. You can use it for HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So we're going to have to go ahead and designate what it can work with, right? We can go ahead and click on the down arrow and choose, that it's Python. It does put the PY in there. That's a lot of trouble. You could have just typed in .py, which is what a lot of people do, and then save. And notice now that I have color. So I do like the run button. I don't know why they put it to such an extreme to the right. So if you'll click on that, you'll notice that you've got your output down here below Hello World. But Visual Studio Code throws in all this extra stuff related to the path to where your file is. Notice how that the file is in the Python _work folder that's on the desktop, that's in the account called presentations, that's a member of the users folder that's off of the C drive, and as well as some other little stuff that many users really don't want to know about, or beginners don't want to know about. but apparently Microsoft thinks it's important for you to know about that. So we're going to be studying the Python programming language. What editor you use is up to you. I'll never know what you use because you're going to be submitting a file that's a text file. And when I open it, I'm not going to be able to tell what you created it in. For all I know, you created it using Notepad. The important thing to note here, I think, is just simply to distinguish between using the Python interpreter versus using a text editor such as Idle, Sublime, or Visual Studio Code. Each one of them offers increasing levels of help when you write your code. You will find out that Visual Studio Code provides a lot more visual feedback when you're writing your code, or helpfulness in writing your code that can help you write your code, whereas the other ones will not. I did say I wanted to show you what a traceback error is. Let me see if I can fake one out on here. Let me see if I don't have that. Well, see what I was talking about? See how I'm getting those little underlined squiggly thingies? I don't even have to wait to run this. The traceback is when you run this and then you get something down below. This is called the traceback, and it says, hey, I got a problem on line 1, and it's pointing to it, and then it says invalid syntax. But you see how Visual Studio Code let me know about that right away. Let me go ahead and contrast that with, let me see if I can do that with Sublime. So let me see if I can get rid of the single quote here. Will it give me, see, it doesn't give me those little squiggly underlines. Well, actually, it gave me that big old red thing to the right after I pressed enter. Let me go ahead and do a Control Z. See, with this one, it seemed like I had to actually go to the next line to get that. But still, it's not as informative, perhaps. If I do run this with the Control B, I get the traceback. See, that's the word that we need to be aware of, the traceback. In a very similar kind of way, it says line 1, and it's pointing to where the problem is. It says invalid syntax. And then that means you got to look at this and figure out what you did wrong. So I'm going to close that, come in here again and put the single quote. And now it seems to be okay. I can go ahead and run this again, and it's okay. Coming back to Visual Studio Code, same thing here. They do need to match. Remember, a string literal, a string literal can be passed to, in this case, the print function as either single quotes or double quotes. It doesn't matter, So let me go ahead and run this to verify that I have fixed the error, and yes, I have fixed the error. It's running without error. So the word traceback means that you're tracing back to where the error is. And if you're a human being, you're going to get errors. As a programmer, we have to learn how to create code, run code, and debug the code so that we eliminate these syntax errors. Because the syntax errors are the most elementary of all. There are other kinds of errors. There's runtime errors, and there's logic errors, and those are more complicated to go ahead and deal with. Right now, as a beginner, we want to just pass the level of syntax errors and understand how to deal with a syntax error. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. I just went ahead and showed you the command prompt on here, and I showed you a couple of text editors, compared that with the text editors here. So let me go ahead and type in CMD again. So remember, this is the command prompt. He called it a terminal. Terminal window is a word that you use when you're in a Linux world, of which the Mac is. The Mac is a subset of that world. So it's an appropriate word to use there. But for right here, this is called the command prompt, right? Now, the book says that you can hold down the shift key and press the right mouse button on your keyboard so that you can go ahead and start the command prompt. Now, that was in the earlier versions of Windows 10. In the newer versions of Windows 10, that has been replaced with open the PowerShell. So the PowerShell is referred to as many times the blue command prompt, maybe. So let me just go ahead and show you them both here. So here's the classic command prompt, and here is PowerShell. So in this particular one, it's the classic old, could you say old-fashioned legacy interface to issue DOS commands. You can do batch files, which is a collection of DOS commands. But in PowerShell, you can do not only DOS commands, but you can also go ahead and do scripts, which allows for a lot more power. It can be in a cell, scripts meaning a collection of files that can automate a particular process. So it's the blue screen here, the PowerShell screen, is typically considered more advanced and more powerful than the command prompt. I just wanted to go ahead and show you the difference there, and that small, things always change. So again, the author says right mouse click and or right, hold down, he says, hold down the shift key and right mouse click on the desktop. And then he says, click command prompt. Well, it's not there, right? It's not there because the newer versions of Windows has changed that to the default being the PowerShell. And so that's really another story, but I did want to go ahead and make that distinction with you. But other than that, that's my rendition of chapter 1 and the more important things that chapter 1 was about. It was a comparison of the Python interpreter with using a simple text editor, and comparing those two ways of running a very simple one-line Python command. And that one line that we learned was the print, utilizing the print function. And it's referred to as a function because it returns something. And you send it an argument. The argument is inside the parenthesis. In this case, we went ahead and passed a string literal, and Python got that and ended up showing it in the command window, right? Or in the Python window. So that it returned that into the terminal window. Well, so that's my rendition of this chapter. Hopefully you got something out of it. Thank you very much.